Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare
Hare Krishna. Jai Nityananda Prabhu ki. Om Ajnanatimmirandasya Gnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yenum Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin iti namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pasyata Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shivasadi Gaurabhaktarunda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. We'll have a special talk about Lord Nityananda Prabhu's appearance day. So Lord Nityananda was, as we all know, incarnation of Lord Balaram, and he is the representation of Lord Balaram's mercy on all the living entities. And it is said that the spiritual master is a representation of Lord Nityananda. So we'll spend a few minutes reminiscing on the pastimes of Lord Nityananda's early childhood days and spend more time talking about his preaching mission. His mission to liberate all the living entities of this material world during Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's presence. So Nityananda Prabhu was born in 1473, and his parents were Hadai Pandit and Padmavati. He was born in the village of Ekachakra. Right? There is a wonderful description of Nityananda Prabhu's childhood pastimes, where he would enact the scenes from Lord Krishna's and Lord Ramachandra's pastimes. And the special thing about his enactions was that he would enact, he would be Lakshmana in the Ramayana enactions. And then when he was doing the drama, he would get so much into the mood of being Lakshmana that there were many scenes that were being enacted which was not there in the script itself. And people used to wonder, where is this coming from? Is he making up on the fly? And so he immersed the residents of Ekachakra with the pastimes of Lord Krishna and Lord Ramachandra by being in that mood of Balaram and Lakshmana. So his childhood was spent very wonderfully, the first 12 years of his life in Ekachakra village, immersing everybody in the Lord's holy names and his pastimes. When he was 13 years old, Lakshmipati Tirtha, a very famous sannyasi, came to the house of Hadai Pandit. At that time, Lakshmipati Tirtha requested Hadai Pandit to send Nityananda Prabhu as his companion and as his servant. And in those days, in the Vedic tradition, you couldn't refuse the request of a sannyasi as a guest who has come to your house. And so, even with reluctance, Hadai Pandit let go of Nityananda Prabhu to be his companion, traveling companion. It is said that a few days after this happened, Hadaya Pandit actually passed on from this world. So, we see that Nityananda Prabhu now travels all over India. This is a description of his visits to different parts of India for 20 years. And the parallel is drawn of Lord Balarama. See, when the Kurukshetra war is being fought, Krishna agrees to participate, not fight, in the Kurukshetra battle. Right? He says he won't fight, but you can have him, like Arjuna requests Krishna to be on their side without fighting, and he becomes his charioteer. And the entire Yadu dynasty's army is with Duryodhana. But Lord Balaram does not take part. Right? And he goes on a pilgrimage. So similarly, the parallel is drawn of how Nityananda Prabhu went on a whole pilgrimage of all the different parts of India and purified those places with his wonderful presence. So for the next, as I said, 20 years. In fact, during this time is when he gets initiated by Lakshmipati Tirtha. Here there is a very interesting pastimes about his initiation, which is tied to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So, Nityananda Prabhu was initiated by Lakshmipati Tirtha, who is also the spiritual master of, whose spiritual master is he? Anybody remembers? Who is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's spiritual master? Who is his spiritual master? Madhavendra Puri. So Lakshmipati Tirtha was the spiritual master of Madhavendra Puri also. So in that sense, Madhavendra Puri and Nityananda Prabhu are god brothers. So that is why you will see that in the later pastimes, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu get together, you see that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu always, kept that in the back of his mind, and he treated him as a very respectable, god brother of his spiritual master. That mood Chaitanya Mahaprabhu maintained. So this is this wonderful pastime of Nityananda Prabhu getting initiated by Lakshmipati Tirtha. So after this, Nityananda Prabhu comes back to Nadia. By this time, he has heard about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, starting his Sankirtana movement, and is very eager to participate. And there is a wonderful pastime of the both of them meeting for the very first time in Nandanacharya's house. In fact, it is said that Nityananda Prabhu purposefully went there and he did not reveal himself. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sends Advaitacharya and Srivas Thakura to go look for him. And they cannot find him. And then there's a beautiful pastime of the meeting of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu, which is there's a beautiful painting done on guidance of Srila Prabhupada on this matter. So after that, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu actually wanted to go to Vrindavan. Right? And there's a whole pastime of how Nityananda Prabhu takes him to Shantipura, and there a lot of preaching happens instead of taking him to Vrindavan. And then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu comes to Jagannath Puri. So when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is in Puri, Nityananda Prabhu is with him in the initial days for a very short time actually. Right? After that, what happens? Where does Chaitanya Mahaprabhu go? Anybody remembers? He goes on a tour, right? South India tour. So that was for almost 2 years. And so during these 2 years, Nityananda Prabhu stays back in Jagannath Puri. And by the time Chaitanya Mahaprabhu comes back, Nityananda Prabhu would have very nicely cultivated the whole of Jagannath Puri into wonderful devotees, and very nice preaching would be going on at that time. And when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu comes back, he is very pleased with the preaching mission of Lord Nityananda. At this time, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu requests Nityananda to go and preach back in Navadvip. Right? Because by this time, imagine, it has been almost more than 2 years since both Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu left Navadvip, and the preaching would be suffering over there. And so Chaitanya Mahaprabhu requests him to go to Navadvip to continue preaching. We see over here very similar parallels to Srila Prabhupada, right? Who, as our spiritual master, is the representative of Lord Nityananda in his own life. See, Lord Nityananda was enjoying living in Jagannath Puri, right? And wonderful preaching was going on. He could have just stayed back over there, right? Just like Srila Prabhupada was in Vrindavan, in the most important temple in Vrindavan, the heart of Vrindavan, in the Radha Damodar Mandir. But on the request of his spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada went to preach. Right? He came to America to preach. In fact, later in Srila Prabhupada's life in 1977, one of Prabhupada's disciples recounts a pastime. Yashomati Nandan Prabhu, who recently passed away, he actually went to one of Srila Prabhupada's godbrothers in Mayapur, Madhav, what is his name? See here. Madhav Maharaj. So he was one of Srila Prabhupada's senior godbrothers. And so, as a courtesy, he had gone to meet him. So when Madhav Maharaj saw Yashomati Nandan Prabhu, he said, come here. Oh, you are disciple of A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, is it? Okay, nice. No, he was a good businessman in his life, and he's used his business acumen nicely for his preaching movement. That's all okay, but that is not real bhakti. Real bhakti is something else. Like that, he had made a statement. And Yashomati Nandan Prabhu came back and recounted this with Srila Prabhupada. And for the next 3 days, Srila Prabhupada talked about the importance of preaching. He said, look at this sannyasi. He's my senior god brother, and he has been, practicing spiritual life for so long, and he has not understood the essence of my spiritual master's mission. How preaching is the essence. It is not about, sitting in a place. We can all happily sit in Vrindavan or Mayapur or someplace and, try to do our own practice. But that is not what attracts the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu. That was not the mood of Lord Nityananda. His mood was of intense preaching. It is said that when he went back to Navadvip to preach, he would go door to door and beg people to join in the Sankirtana movement. Right? And he was so merciful, he was so magnanimous that he would give Krishna Prema to each and every person, even though they were not at all qualified. Right? So, that mood of preaching, that mood of intense preaching, and making sacrifice for the preaching movement was something that Srila Prabhupada very, very nicely demonstrated to all of us and requested all of us to do. Now, which is the most famous pastime of Nityananda Prabhu which shows his mercy? Jagai and Madai. Right? We all know about this particular pastime. Jagai and Madai were very, very, infamous brothers. In fact, when Nityananda Prabhu heard about it, that they were so sinful. Actually, people were telling, I know you go preaching everywhere. Please don't go to Jagai and Madai's house. They were warning him. They are the lowest of mankind. They are always intoxicated. They are woman hunters. And they are always, doing all kinds of sinful activities. And so they requested him, please don't go over there. But actually, as soon as Nityananda Prabhu heard this, he said, no, we should absolutely go. Why? Because if such people can be made into devotees of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, of Krishna, of the Sankirtana movement, right? Imagine how famous Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Sankirtana movement will become. Everybody will say, Jagai and Madai became devotees. Right? How powerful is this process? And that is why, he specifically wanted to give his favor to these two really fallen brothers. And we know the wonderful pastime of how when he went to preach to them, they reciprocated his love and his mercy and compassion by throwing a mud pot, at on his forehead. And Nityananda Prabhu fell down and there was blood coming out of his forehead. Yet he was still imploring them, no, please chant Hare Krishna, please join the Sankirtana movement. Bolo Hari, Hari Hari Bo. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu heard about this, he was infuriated. Right? Immediately, he called his Sudarshana Chakra to cut off the heads. And were famous words of Nityananda Prabhu. Right? In this Kali Yuga, if you start killing, all the sinful people, everybody in Kali Yuga is a Jagai and Madai. Then who will be left to preach? Right? So, that wonderful pastime of liberating Jagai and Madai is a great testimony to the mercy and compassion of Lord Nityananda. So when Lord Nityananda was preaching in Navadvip, he gave up his Avaduta lifestyle and he married two sisters of Suryadas Sarakel. And who are the two sisters? Anybody remembers? One is very famous. Nobody remembers? Vasudha and Janhavi Devi. Okay. So Vasudha, from Vasudha, there was born a son by name Veerchandra and a daughter. I forgot the daughter's name. What is the daughter's name? I can't find it here quickly. So, it is said that Vasudha and Jahnavi Devi were Revati Devi and Varuni Devi, the wives of Lord Balaram. In fact, right after childbirth, very soon, Vasudha passes on from this world, and Jahnavi Devi brings them up. And she actually initiates Virachandra. And Jahnavi Devi is known as the very first stalwart preacher, Vaishnavi, in our Gaudiya Parampara. She was known as a wonderful preacher, and she established a whole preaching line. So that is Jahnavi Devi. So this was the household pastimes of Lord Nityananda. His marriage to Vasudha and Jahnavi Devi, and the birth of his two children. So we see that, after this, a few times Lord Nityananda comes to Jagannath Puri and spends some wonderful pastimes with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Lord Nityananda Prabhu is very, very famous for his wonderful singing and dancing in the Jagannath Puri Rath Yatra. Right? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would organize several different troops. He would lead himself one troop, and then one of the troops was led by Nityananda Prabhu. And there's wonderful descriptions of his beautiful singing and dancing in Jagannath Puri in the Rath Yatra. After this, there is the pastimes of Lord Nityananda going back to home, back to Godhead, to continue his eternal pastimes in the spiritual world. He had established a deity, right? Bankimaraya. And it is said that Lord Nityananda merged into this deity of Lord Krishna. It's a wonderful deities. Even now you can go to, it was in Ekachakra itself. You can see that the deities are still there. And that's how he wound up his pastimes. In between, we see that Lord Nityananda, in all of his pastimes, he never really got angry with anybody. Right? It was always this magnanimous and wonderful mercy he gave. There's only one instance of Ramachandra Khan. So Ramachandra Khan is the one who would have sent the prostitute to Haridas Thakur. Right? And then he would always very insulting, and he would never appreciate the devotees and always put all kinds of obstacles in the pathway. It is said that, Lord Nityananda went to his house to liberate him from his sinful body. So when he went to his house, he still went with a mission of compassion. And they reached late in the night, and then he requested that all of his people were there. They wanted to stay in his house. In the houses in those days, all these rich people, they had the inner chambers where they lived. And they had something called a Durga Mantap in the front, where they would meet people, and there would be a deity of Durga for the Kali worshippers and all that. When he says, okay, can we stay over here? Ramachandra Khan sent word with his servant saying, no, you're not fit to stay in the Durga Mantap, you can go stay in the Goshala. As an insult to him. You can stay with the cows. Lord Nityananda at that time is the only instance of him getting angry. There's one more, but it's a very esoteric pastime. So he says, you are, insulting us like this, all these wonderful devotees who have come for preaching. And so he says that, next day, the Muslim rulers, soldiers will come and they will destroy this place, kill all the cows and eat the meat of the cows in this Durga Mantap. and destroy your entire family. And he goes away from there to another village. Next day, the soldiers of the Muslim emperor come and completely kill all of his family, and in fact, the entire village is devastated. And this is the one instance of Nityananda Prabhu exhibiting his transcendental anger, because Ramachandra Khan was such a obstructor in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission. So on this wonderful day of Nityananda Trayodasi, let us remember the wonderful mercy and compassion of Nityananda Prabhu. There's a beautiful painting Srila Prabhupada got his disciples to draw, that is there in one of the Adi Leela. If you look at the book, you will see this picture. There is a picture of a devotee sitting and listening to the spiritual master. And then there is also a small altar, just like in the altars we have in the houses, like a rectangular box, and there are deities in the back. And there is a Paramatma in the heart of the devotee, there is a Paramatma in the heart of the spiritual master, and then there is a glow on the face of the deities. And the caption of that particular plate reads that the spiritual master is the representation, right, of the Paramatma, of Lord Nityananda Prabhu's mercy. And that's how, the instruction, right? The Lord is present within our heart, is instructing us. The Lord is present outside as spiritual master and instructing us. And that wonderful form of the Lord, who is so compassionate on us and who is guiding us through all our life, is the manifestation of Lord Nityananda's mercy. Okay. Nityananda Mahaprabhu ki. Anybody has any quick questions or comments? Okay, and it's time for Abhishek. Are the deities ready for Abhishek? Can somebody please stand for Shiv? Jai Nityananda Prabhu ki. Can somebody help with setting up the microphones for the singing and everything?